You're listening to the New York Sports Show, the #1 all New York sports podcast. Hosted by Dominic Konareski.
Daniel Jones is a bust. He's been a bust since day one. There's no going around that saying or going through any cracks to prove that he isn't. But what you can prove, though, is that he was doomed on day one. We're more like week 5 of the 2019 regular season. Let me explain that to you guys briefly. Daniel Jones came in to start 2019 on the bench. The game plan was to have him sit and learn and develop behind future Hall of Fame multi-winning Super Bowl quarterback Eli Manning. Now, the latter parts of Eli Manning's career were not pretty. He was a shell of his former self. Nevertheless, though, 2018, despite going 5-11, he just threw 1 yard shy of a 4,300 passing yard season. Eli Manning was able to throw for big numbers, but the Giants' offensive line was as non-existent as my dad in my life. Eli Manning was the starter for 2019, as I said. Daniel Jones was supposed to develop and learn off of Manning. Manning started the season 1-3. The Giants management, they panicked. So what do? They sit Eli Manning, they bench him. He never saw the starting light again, and you throw Daniel Jones, a rookie quarterback who was not supposed to start during his rookie season, out into the light and put loads of pressure on him to go out there and win. Maybe not instantly, but go out there and win games. He went 3-9. 3-9 in the win-loss column. They forced Eli Manning into an early, very unhonorable retirement after all he did for the organization, and the Giants only won 3 more games with Daniel Jones. They did not gain anything that season except a good draft pick, and they already drafted their quarterback a season prior. So the Giants stick it out with Daniel Jones. 2020, they go 5-9. 2021, 4-7, they took a step back. All the rumors of a bust were popping up at this point. So what does Daniel Jones do? He goes 9-6-1. Could not even win double-digit games and tied 1 game, which was a very winnable game. That's still talked about to this day of being a very winnable game for the Giants. And even so, in the latter part of that season, Daniel Jones and the Giants, they struggled. They struggled heavily, but still ended up getting an upset win against the Minnesota Vikings, who are notorious, though, for Kirk Cousins kind of blowing it in the playoffs over the recent years before his trade. Nevertheless, though, despite having bust labeled all over him, the Giants thought it was going to be a good idea to pay Daniel Jones and lock him up for not the rest of his career, but for a decent amount of time. Allocate a lot of money towards one player who was labeled a bust and had a 9-win regular season. That's a great idea. Since signing a $160 million contract, Daniel Jones has thrown 2 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. He's thrown more pick sixes than actual touchdowns to his own wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. And speaking of running backs, let's talk about Saquon Barkley, who tore up in Brazil like a losing lottery ticket. The Giants paid Daniel Jones, who was labeled a bust, but yet don't even give Saquon Barkley more than a 5-second look after all he's done for the organization. We could all agree that playoff season that Daniel Jones had was mainly led by a very dominant season from Saquon Barkley. So how much credit does Daniel Jones really get from that season? And now here we are, the Giants are not necessarily stuck with Daniel Jones, but if they decide to part ways with him after the season, they're going to eat over $20 million in cap space.